They didn't think I'd show, not after 6 years of silence. Not after being erased from the family group chat, the family photos, the family. But I did. In full dress blues, medals polished, spine straight, I stepped into the reception hall like it was a battlefield, and it was. My name wasn't on the seating chart, not even a title. They tucked me at table 12, next to the kitchen door, behind the pillar. Out of sight, out of mind. But Hayley, my sister, made sure I wasn't forgotten. "Even my big sister made it," she said into the mic, that trademark sugar acid in her voice. "All the way from wherever she guards doors now." The laughter was polite, then cruel. "Let's give a round of applause to the gatekeeper of greatness." A few guests actually clapped. Then he moved. Andrew, the groom, my former subordinate, the man whose life I once saved. He stepped forward, quiet, focused, and he saluted. "Ma'am," he said, loud enough to slice the air, "please forgive my wife." He turned to the crowd. "This is Major General Rebecca Cole, my commanding officer." Hayley's mic hit the floor. She fainted, and the ballroom held its breath. They thought I wouldn't show. They thought shame, guilt, and 6 years of silence would be enough to keep me away. But then again, they never really understood the kind of woman I became. The envelope sat on my steel desk like a dare, elegant ivory with embossed borders, sealed with the kind of wax stamp that screamed tradition and control. And there it was, my name, written in full, Lieutenant General Rebecca Cole. It was the first time I'd seen it printed by a family hand in over 6 years, and even then they had no idea who I really was. I didn't open it immediately. I already knew. Whispers travel even across continents, an offhand comment from an old classmate, an email that reached my aide, then finally the full confirmation. Hayley was getting married to Major Andrew Foster. That irony was so sharp, it cut clean through the years. I pulled him from a minefield in Helmand. Now he was marrying the woman who once told me to my face, "You are the shame of this family." 6 years. That's how long it had been since my mother spoke my name aloud. No calls, no letters. Not even when the explosion nearly stole my hearing during my second deployment. When the report hit military news, they said, "Miraculously survived." But from my family, not even a condolence. And now this glossy invitation with its cruel elegance. Inside, one word scrawled in her handwriting, slanted just so, "Behave." The wind outside the base in Stuttgart howled like it heard the insult. Inside my quarters, the silence was sharper. Cold metal bed, locked trunk, pressed uniforms that had more consistency than blood ever did. The knock came exactly as expected, 2 firm taps. Simmons. He walked in without asking, as usual. The only man who never needed permission to read the storm on my face. He saw the envelope, didn't say a word. "You going?" he finally asked. I didn't answer. I just slid the invitation across the table. He picked it up, scanned it. "Foster," he muttered. "The one you dragged out with half a leg left?" "Same one." Simmons sat back. No surprise, just measured silence. "You saved him. Now he's marrying your sister." He didn't need to add, "The sister who disowned you, slandered you, silenced you." My hands were steady, but my heart was digging up bones I thought I'd buried. "You think I should go?" I asked. Simmons looked me in the eye. "Depends. You going to fight a war or bury a ghost?" I let out a breath. "Maybe just watch one burn." He didn't smile. "Then go, but don't wear your stars like armor. Wear them like memory. Let them remember who you became without them." Even after he left, the weight of that sentence stayed. They thought I wouldn't come back. They thought shame would chain me to the other side of the world. They thought 6 years of silence had buried me for good. But shame has never been my leash. It's been my shadow. And I've walked beside it long enough to stop fearing it. The invitation arrived in an envelope too delicate for the history it carried. Thick paper, gold foil edges, and my name, my full name, printed in elegant serif, Lieutenant General Rebecca Cole. No one in that family had called me Rebecca in years. They stopped the moment I became inconvenient. I turned the envelope over slowly in my hands. I already knew what was inside. The whispers had been crawling across oceans for weeks. A colleague mentioned it offhand. A forwarded email reached my aid. Then finally, the cruel truth, laid out like a knife in lace. Haley was getting married, and not just married, to Major Andrew Foster, of all people. I hadn't spoken to my mother since my father's funeral, not even a message when my second deployment ended with shrapnel in my shoulder and blood in my boots. When I earned my second star, the Pentagon released a press briefing. My name ran in national headlines, but not one call, not a single line from the woman who gave me that name, until now. Inside the envelope, formal wording, a floral font, and one handwritten word scrawled beneath the RSVP. Behave. Not we hope you come, not we miss you, just behave. Outside my quarters in Stuttgart, the wind rattled the flag like it was offended on my behalf. Inside, my world was steel and silence, regulation cot, polished boots, a locked trunk holding the only things I trusted to stay mine. A knock broke the quiet. 2 sharp raps. Simmons. He stepped in without waiting for permission. He never needed it. He'd known me since I was a hard-eyed captain with too much discipline and not enough forgiveness. He saw the envelope on the desk and said nothing for a moment. Then, "You going?" I didn't answer, just pushed the invitation across the desk. He read the name. His eyebrows didn't even twitch. "Foster," he muttered. "That's the one from Helmand, right? The minefield?" "Same one." Simmons leaned back. That silence again. Not awkward, just deliberate, measured, grounded, familiar. "You saved his life," he said. "And now he's marrying your sister." The understatement of the decade. I nodded. My voice didn't rise. "Yep." "You think I should go?" I asked. He studied me like a general assesses a battlefield. "Depends. You going there to fight a war or bury a ghost?" I gave a quiet laugh. Not the kind that lifts weight, the kind that sinks deeper. Maybe just watch one burn. He didn't smile. "Then go," he said, voice low, "but don't wear your stars like armor. Wear them like memory. Let them remember who you became without them." When he left, I stood at the window overlooking the drill field. A new batch of recruits ran clumsy drills in fresh fatigues, loud, eager, untested. They reminded me of myself before I learned that some wars start in your own kitchen. I turned from the window and walked to the closet. There it was, my dress uniform. Still perfectly pressed, untouched since the funeral. They buried my father with full Marine honours, 21-gun salute, flag folding, and brass that echoed through stone. But no one saved me a seat. My mother didn't even meet my eyes. Haley glanced once, cold and unreadable, then turned away. Afterwards, Barbara Cole touched my forearm and hissed, "You shouldn't have worn the uniform. You made it about you." I didn't argue. I walked out. And I didn't come back. Until now. This wasn't a reunion. It was a reckoning. And I was ready. Booking the flight took less time than deciding to open the envelope. A red-eye from Stuttgart to DC, 1 layover in Frankfurt, no return ticket. I didn't tell my driver. Didn't inform base command. Didn't update the calendar. This wasn't protocol. It was personal. As the plane cut through the Atlantic sky, the stewardess offered me champagne when she saw the ribbons on my uniform. I declined. Asked for water. I didn't want celebration. I wanted clarity. Landing at Dulles felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life. The air smelled of fresh wax and antiseptic. I moved through customs without pause. My military ID had that effect. Invisibility, oddly enough, made things faster. I'd barely cleared the terminal when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go. Then curiosity, or maybe something older, won. Hello? Well, you actually came. Hayley. Her voice hadn't changed. Still that syrupy lilt over steel. She could coat poison in honey better than anyone. I didn't respond. You didn't say you were coming to celebrate, she continued. But hey, progress is progress. 6 years and suddenly you RSVP? I came because I was invited. Right, she chirped, because Mom guilted you into it. I didn't dignify that with an answer. She giggled, but it sounded brittle. Andrew's looking forward to seeing you. You two always had chemistry. That stopped me mid-step on the moving walkway. That's not funny. I didn't mean it to be, she said, but I could hear the smirk bleeding through every syllable. That same practiced innocence she used on teachers, friends, reporters, always playing the sweet one while pushing daggers behind the curtain. Then the real reason for the call slipped out, sharp and shallow. You're not showing up in full uniform, are you? It's not festive. I hung up. Outside, Virginia was blooming. Dogwoods, cherry blossoms, like someone had paid extra for the season to show off. I took the back roads to Alexandria. I knew them by heart, even if they no longer knew me. Past old mailboxes, faded fences, the corners where I scraped knees as a kid, chasing a life I hadn't realised was already rigged. When I pulled into the cul-de-sac, Mrs. Langford was out front, still trimming her hydrangeas, like they held national significance. She squinted at the car, hose in hand like a question mark. Rebecca? I stepped out. Hi, Mrs. Langford. She blinked, lips pursing in polite confusion. My goodness, still in uniform, I see. Yes, ma'am. She hesitated, gaze trailing over my rank bars. I thought you might have left after everything. Some of us stay, I said. I walked past her garden without waiting for a reply. The coal house hadn't changed, still too polished, too perfect, like it was trying to convince itself it didn't have a past. Barbara answered the door in pearl earrings and pressed beige. Her hair was pulled tight, her posture tighter. Please don't ruin this for Hayley, she said instead of hello. There it was. The family's brand of welcome, accusation masked as plea. Inside, the house still smelled of lemon polish and buried secrets. The chandelier above the dining room cast a soft glow over a battlefield disguised as celebration. 15 seats, 1 too many, or maybe 1 too few, depending on whether they still counted me. I stood in the archway, scanning the room. Hayley was already laughing too loudly at something Cousin Grant said. He wasn't funny, but Hayley had a way of making noise sound like status. My seat was at the far end, not next to her, not even in frame for the inevitable family photo. It was beside the sideboard, heat from the kitchen brushing my back, conversation not quite reaching. A message in placement, subtle, deliberate. I pulled out the chair. It creaked louder than expected. Hayley raised her glass. To family, she said with a sparkle too polished. Barbara added, to new beginnings. Uncle Dean, with his bourbon breath, chimed in, to Major Foster and the bride-to-be. No one said my name. No, Rebecca's home. No, Lieutenant General Cole is here. Just silence, dressed in linen and wine. And I? I sipped water like it was armor. I let the absence speak louder than presence ever could. The terminal was quieter than I remembered. Maybe it was the red-eye flight, or maybe the silence just clung to me wherever I went. As the automatic doors of Dulles International opened, a wave of stale, recycled air greeted me like an old enemy. I adjusted the strap of my duffel and kept walking. The name on the sign outside read, Welcome to Virginia. It didn't. I didn't book a car service. I didn't need one. My military ID got me a black sedan through a quiet contract the army kept for senior officers who didn't want to explain themselves. The driver nodded when I gave my name, but didn't ask questions. I appreciated that. The city blurred past the window. Sterile office parks, strip malls, gas stations with flickering signs. Until the landscape softened. Trees replaced concrete. Familiar trees. Magnolia, dogwood, cherry blossom. The neighbourhood hadn't changed much, but I had. My phone vibrated as we hit the freeway ramp. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity poked louder than reason. Hello? Well, you actually came. Hayley's voice. I could feel her smile without seeing it, sweet, breathy, but edged in glass. I didn't come to celebrate, I said flatly. You didn't say anything for 6 years, she replied, too brightly. So, this is progress. I didn't answer. I just wanted to check if you'd be wearing the whole uniform thing. You know, the medals and everything. It's kind of festive here. My jaw tightened. It's a wedding, not a costume party. She laughed, light and theatrical. Still so serious, Becky. I swear the army polished every ounce of fun out of you. I prefer being taken seriously. Yeah, well, she chirped. Don't steal the spotlight, okay? Just blend. I hung up without saying goodbye. Outside the window, spring unfolded like a false memory. Tulips blooming, neighbours walking dogs, kids chalking driveways. I stared at it all like a museum exhibit, familiar but unreachable. We turned onto my mother's cul-de-sac. Her house was still the same. Perfect hedges, white shutters, a porch swing that no one sat on. Like a set piece in a play where I'd been cut from the cast. Mrs. Langford was outside, trimming her azaleas with surgical precision. Her head snapped up when she saw the car pull in. She squinted, then smiled, too surprised to hide it. "Rebecca," she called, "my goodness, you're still military?" "Yes, ma'am," I said, stepping out. "Well, I thought, after everything, you might have retired or disappeared." "Some of us stay," I replied, and walked past her yard like a ghost retracing its own footsteps. The front door opened before I reached it. My mother stood there like she'd been waiting. Pearls, beige slacks, pressed blouse, every thread shouting control. Her eyes scanned my uniform like it offended her. "Please," she said, "don't ruin this for Hayley." I didn't answer. I stepped inside. The house smelled like lemon polish and tightly packed judgment. Nothing out of place, not even the tension. The same grandfather clock ticked in the hallway, the same floral rug cushioned my boots. The only new thing was the extra quiet, the kind that followed years of absence like a shadow. At the dining room table, 15 seats were arranged like pawns. My place card sat at the far end, next to the heat vent, not next to family, just close enough to pretend I was one of them. I pulled out the chair. It creaked. Hayley appeared, silk blouse too white to trust, laugh too loud to be real. She raised a glass of wine. "To family," she announced. "To new beginnings," Barbara added without looking at me. "To Major Foster and the bride-to-be," said Uncle Dean. No one said my name. No one acknowledged the rank on my collar. Not even a nod. Just silence, polished and served cold. I took a sip of water. The wine hadn't reached me yet. Maybe it never would. Dinner passed like a performance. Practiced smiles, shallow toasts, and silverware placed too precisely to feel real. I barely touched my food. The roast was dry. The potatoes were sculpted. The salad was soggy with too much dressing and not enough care, like everything else in that house. Hayley dominated the table as she always had. She had stories, all curated, charming, harmless. Stories about her job at the non-profit, about pivoting into impact and leaning into healing. I'd heard the buzzwords before. They fell from her lips like confetti, pretty but weightless. "And Andrew," she said, glancing lovingly at her groom-to-be, "he's just been so steady. I mean, after what he went through overseas. Incredible resilience. But I guess that's what the army teaches you, right, sis?" Everyone looked at me. I wiped my mouth with the napkin slowly. "It teaches you how to stay alive," I said. Someone chuckled awkwardly. Barbara set her glass down just a little too hard. Haley laughed. "Well, that too." There it was. The crack beneath the performance. The room shifted. I could feel the energy start to gather, like a storm thickening behind silk curtains. Barbara cleared her throat. "We were thinking, maybe don't wear the uniform to the ceremony." She didn't look at me when she said it, just stirred her wine. "It draws attention," she added, casual, like she was talking about the weather. "And this is Haley's day." I kept my voice level. "It's the only formal wear I own." "Well, surely you have something else," she pressed. "Something softer." Haley jumped in. "Yeah, something less structured, less intimidating, you know?" Intimidating. They were always so afraid of what I represented. Strength they couldn't control, honor they didn't understand. "I'm not here to intimidate anyone," I said quietly. Barbara smiled thinly. "Good, because this wedding is about love, not rank." Not rank, but somehow always about status, the clink of crystal, the manicured hands holding forks like weapons, the subtle nods exchanged down the table. It all reeked of performance, and I wasn't invited to play a part. I was invited to sit down and stay quiet. After dessert, the men retreated to the study for cigars. The women clustered in the kitchen, planning final details. I stayed on the patio. The spring air carried the scent of grass and lilac, but it couldn't mask the rot underneath, the kind that came from years of silence dressed up as civility. Andrew found me outside. He stood beside me without a word, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the fence. It took him 2 full minutes to speak. "I didn't know you were coming," he said softly. "You didn't send the invite. I didn't think you'd say yes." I turned to face him. "Did you want me here?" He didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "Do you remember Helmond?" I stared at him. The sand, the heat, the blood. "I remember pulling you out of a flipped Humvee while bullets cracked overhead. I remember dragging you by the vest while your leg poured red into the dirt." He nodded. "You saved my life. And now," I said, "you're marrying my sister." His face was unreadable. "I didn't plan it that way." "I'm sure you didn't." A long silence settled between us, heavy with everything neither of us could undo. "You deserve better than this," he said finally, "from all of them." I stopped expecting anything a long time ago. He looked like he wanted to say more, but Haley called his name from inside, her voice floating through the air like perfume, sweet and unavoidable. He turned. "I'll see you tomorrow." "Count on it," I said. As he walked away, I looked up at the sky. So wide and clean, it felt like an insult. Tomorrow would be the wedding, the reckoning, and I would not blend. The church was beautiful. Of course it was. Haley would accept nothing less. Ivory lilies curled around the altar with the precision of a magazine shoot. Candles flickered in perfect rows. A hush blanketed the room like a silken veil, polished, poised, suffocating. I stood just beyond the entrance, breath caught in the gold-trimmed air. My name wasn't on the seating chart, not as Rebecca, not as Lieutenant General Cole, just R. Cole, printed so faintly on table 12 it could have been mistaken for a typo. I looked again, bottom corner, by the fire exit. Of course. That morning, as my mother handed me a plate of melon I hadn't asked for, she murmured without looking up, "You'll be at the back, for everyone's sake." A photographer brushed past me, didn't look, didn't pause, his lens aimed at Haley, laughing with bridesmaids radiant in designer white, the entire event sculpted around her. I had saved her fiancé's life in a minefield, but I wasn't part of this fairy tale. Barbara approached me like a politician approaching bad press. Her beige dress was tailored, her pearls flawless. She leaned in, voice a breath above silence. "No press. If anyone asks what you do, say logistics." I stared at her. "I command brigades." "And you're here," she whispered, "as a guest. Don't confuse things." Before I could respond, another photographer clicked past me like I was made of air. Barbara melted into the crowd. I found my seat. It wasn't difficult. Just follow the silence. No friends. No family greeting me with warmth. Just a waiter placing the wrong napkin at my plate and saying, "Non-drinking guest?" I didn't correct him. From across the room, Hayley floated like a flame, kissing cheeks, receiving compliments like confetti. Andrew followed her, glass in hand, posture clean, eyes scanning the room. For 1 second, they landed on me. No smile, no nod, just recognition and maybe, shame. Then he looked away. When the music shifted, the guests stood. I stayed seated until the last possible moment. I wasn't here to perform. I wasn't part of the story. Hayley walked down the aisle to a hymn no one heard. People sighed, phones tilted. I watched Andrew. He stood straight, expression unreadable. He never looked back. The ceremony was fast, polished, sanitized, no room for surprises. When the priest called for close family to join the couple for a final blessing, I instinctively rose, not out of duty, just habit. But before I could step into the aisle, I felt her fingers. Barbara's hand gripped just below my elbow, gentle, firm, her voice barely audible. "Let's not confuse things. This is Hayley's day." The breath caught in my chest wasn't surprise, it was memory. I looked at her hand, then at the aisle. Hayley was kneeling, Andrew beside her, surrounded by people who wanted me invisible. So I sat. The violins began. People wiped their eyes. I didn't. At the reception, my table was behind a pillar, near the kitchen, my name printed in lowercase, no rank. The napkin at my place was the wrong colour. They didn't need to say it. They were hoping I'd disappear. Again. Hayley gave a toast, perfect posture, perfect smile. "To new beginnings," she said, "and to the ones who came from far away, just to be part of our joy." Her eyes danced to my table, even the silent sentries among us. Laughter, soft but cruel. I sipped my wine. It tasted like duty. Then she said it, into the mic. "Honestly, who'd have thought she'd show up? She guards doors for a living. Who'd want her at the head table?" The room erupted. Polite laughter, of course. Sharp, controlled, complicit. I didn't flinch, not because it didn't hurt, but because I knew what was coming. Andrew had already turned to me. His glass was down, his hands still. He took 1 step forward. The laughter hadn't even faded before Andrew moved. 1 step. Not rushed, not casual, purposeful. The mic still hung in Hayley's fingers, her arm frozen mid-toast, the edges of her perfect smile starting to crack like sugar glass. She'd planned every moment of this wedding, from the white roses wrapped in silk to the string quartet playing Coldplay in minor key. But this? She hadn't planned this. Andrew took another step. The buzz of conversation died, cut mid-breath. Someone dropped a fork. A child whispered, "What's he doing?" Andrew didn't stop until he was directly in front of me. The entire room turned with him. I stayed seated. He stood tall, cleared his throat, and then, without flourish or hesitation, he saluted, crisp, formal, impeccable, a military salute, not a half-hearted gesture of courtesy, not something for show. It was a declaration. The air inside the room shifted. You could hear fabric rustle, breathing halt. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady, trained, unmistakably clear, "please forgive my wife." Hayley flinched like someone slapped her. He turned, gaze sweeping the crowd. "This woman..." He paused just a second, then found the words, "is Major General Rebecca Cole. She was my commanding officer. She pulled me out of a flipped Humvee in Helmand. I had shrapnel in my ribs, blood in my boots, and no pulse. I'm standing here today because of her. People turned toward me. A few blinked like they were seeing me for the first time. Andrew wasn't finished. She didn't just save me. She led dozens of us through fire. She taught me what real leadership looks like. Integrity under pressure, sacrifice without recognition. A man at the back coughed into silence. Someone muttered, "Jesus." "And now, here she sits," Andrew continued, "on the edge of this room, dismissed like a background prop by a family who should be ashamed of how they've treated her." Barbara's lips parted in shock. Uncle Dean looked down at his drink like it could explain the situation. Cousin Riley froze mid-bite, his fork hovering like guilt suspended. Andrew turned to Haley. "I know you wanted a perfect wedding, but perfect doesn't mean cruel, and it certainly doesn't mean erasing the people who sacrificed more than you'll ever understand." Haley's voice cracked through the silence. "Andrew, don't do this." But it was too late. The mic slipped from her fingers. It hit the floor with a dull thud. She stared at it like it had betrayed her. Then slowly, she turned and walked out of the ballroom. Not stormed, not fled. Walked, deliberate, cold, unwilling to face what had just been exposed. A few bridesmaids exchanged frantic glances, unsure whether to follow or freeze. Barbara rose partway from her chair, faltered, then sat back down. Her expression was unreadable. Pride? Rage? Denial? Andrew stepped aside. That's when it happened. From one of the side tables, a man in a dark blazer stood. He was older, clean-shaven, chest marked with the shadow of a medal he no longer wore. He saluted. Then a woman behind him, navy, I recognized her ribbons, stood as well, saluted. Then another and another. 4 uniformed guests stood silently, saluting not a bride, not a groom, not a family name, but me. The woman they had tried to push behind a pillar, beside the kitchen, under a lowercase name, and then the applause began, slow, uneven, tentative, until it wasn't. Hands came together in waves, building from the corners of the room to the very centre. People rose, some confused, some ashamed, some genuinely moved, but they clapped, not out of politeness, but out of recognition. I stayed seated, not because I didn't appreciate it, but because I didn't need to stand to be seen anymore. Andrew picked up the mic again, and this time his voice was soft. "Let's take a moment, not just for love and marriage, but for those who came home unwelcomed. For the ones who wear scars beneath their collars, for those whose stories were rewritten or erased by the very people who should have protected them." A hush fell, not forced, not ceremonial, real. People bowed their heads, some wiped eyes, some looked straight at me, and for the first time in years I looked back, not as a soldier, not as a daughter, not as the family's shame, but as me. I didn't return to the hotel that night. Instead, I drove, no destination, just movement. The road unspooled beneath me like something being let go. I ended up in the one place I hadn't planned on going, the cemetery. The gate creaked open with the same kind of resistance I'd come to expect from this family. Gravel crunched beneath my boots as I made my way toward the Cole family plot. Dad's headstone gleamed in the moonlight, polished and dignified. It was exactly how he would have wanted it, orderly, sharp-edged, and silent. I stood there for a long time, just breathing, just remembering. Then I saw it. Tucked beneath a small marble vase, weather-worn and barely visible, a sealed envelope. It was addressed in my father's handwriting. "To Rebecca, when you're ready." I didn't open it there. I drove back, locked the door behind me, and sat cross-legged on the hotel carpet, with the letter resting in my lap like a weight I hadn't realised I'd been carrying all my life. I opened it with the same discipline I'd used to disarm bombs, slowly, carefully. Inside, his handwriting flowed with the practiced clarity of a Marine who valued precision above all else. "I know you'll find this after I'm gone, And I know that if you found it, something brought you back. I wanted you to know I never stopped watching. I saw your first deployment report. I saw the promotion list. I watched from the sidelines because your mother made it clear. My presence, my pride in you, it complicated things. My breath hitched. I kept reading. Haley was always fragile in ways I didn't know how to fix. Barbara asked me to make her the centre, to protect her from comparisons. I tried, God, I tried, but I never once doubted who the real leader in this family was. It was you. It was always you. My hands were shaking now. If you're reading this, you've come back into the lion's den. And if they've treated you like less than you are, I'm sorry I ever let that happen. I should have spoken louder. I should have made it impossible for them to silence you. There's a safety deposit box at Montclair Bank. Key enclosed. It's yours. Not shared, not family. Yours. I stared at the small brass key that had fallen from the envelope. My father had left me something. Not just money, not just recognition. He had left me a piece of truth. A truth he hadn't dared to say aloud while alive. I sat there, the hum of the city muffled by the thick hotel walls, but inside me was a roar I couldn't silence. He had known. He had known. The next morning I went to the bank. The manager raised an eyebrow when I presented the key and ID, but said nothing else. Just led me to a quiet, windowless room and unlocked the box. Inside, another letter, a USB drive and an old silver pin, the same one my father used to wear on his dress blues. The USB drive held scanned copies of every commendation I'd received, every award, every mission brief that proved my integrity. He had kept them all, protected them, just in case. The second letter was shorter. This is your legacy, Rebecca, not theirs. If anyone ever questions what you did, who you were, let this speak louder than their whispers. And know this, I was proud of you every single day, even the silent ones. I left the bank in silence, but inside something seismic shifted. He hadn't said those words when he was alive, but he'd written them. And now, finally, I had a father who didn't just believe in me, he saw me. The truth had a strange gravity. It didn't lift the weight, but it made it real, and real could be carried. I didn't plan to see Barbara again, but something about that letter, about the pin, the USB, the words I never heard, made me realize I couldn't leave without saying what needed to be said, not this time. She answered the door in a beige cardigan, same pearls as the rehearsal dinner. She looked tired, but not fragile, just weathered, like stone that refused to erode. "You're back," she said, like I'd returned from a walk instead of a war. "I have something to return," I said, holding out the envelope. Dad's handwriting. She froze, taking it with cautious hands. "Where?" "Cemetery. He left it under the vase." She didn't read it, just held it like it might detonate. "I saw the deposit box too," I added. "The letter, the pin, the drive." She inhaled sharply but said nothing. "You always said I embarrassed this family, that I overshadowed Haley, that I was too cold, too rigid, but you never admitted that you feared me." Her eyes snapped up. "Feared you?" "Yes," I said, "because I didn't bend." A long silence stretched between us like tightrope. Then she spoke, quieter than I expected. "I feared losing her." I tilted my head. "She was always delicate, Rebecca. Always comparing herself. You were born strong, like your father. But Haley needed scaffolding, attention, applause. She needed to be the one shining." "And what did I need?" I asked. Barbara blinked, as if she genuinely didn't know. "I needed a mother, Barbara, not a manager." For a moment I thought that was it, that she'd slam the door or call me ungrateful, but instead she said, "He wanted to tell you everything, but I asked him not to. I thought I was protecting her." "You weren't." "No," she said, "I wasn't." I turned to leave. Then I heard her voice again, straining. Did he say he was proud?" I paused. "He wrote it," I said, "and that's enough." I walked out into the late morning light, the kind that makes shadows sharper.